last minute stuff. Hello and welcome to Different Paths and Shared Values. These are conversations around astrology and human experience. I'm Julie May Biron, and my co-host is Wendy Fritz, who also happens to be my cousin. Thanks, Wendy, for being
Yay.
here. Okay, this is our second podcast, and it's so much fun discussing relevant and timely topics from our individual viewpoints and where we're going from different paths, but we share that common focus and we usually end up in the same place. So today's theme for me in astrology is Uranus in Gemini, which is a transit that's happening very soon and it's major. Wendy is coming at it from lived experience and societal observation. And like I said, with us, it ends up being about the same thing, but also about the stories that we inherited and whether we're brave enough to rewrite them. So I'm going to start with the astrology. It's Uranus entering Gemini on Saturday, the 25th of April. This happens every 84 years, Uranus entering Gemini. And Uranus is a planet of revolution. It is evolution also, but in this respect, it's revolution and it moves into the sign of Gemini, which is about communication and story and community. This transit, Uranus and Gemini, last happened in 1941 to 1949, World War II. So this is the historical anchor that opens our conversation today. Gemini is dual natured. It has two sides to it. It rules communication, the stories we tell, how information travels, community, and the mind. And then Uranus comes in and it brings disruption and liberation and revolution to all of that. But it can also scatter, it can overwhelm, and it can create information chaos. So Uranus in Gemini disrupts the stories that we passed down through families and cultures. So how do we know which stories are worth disrupting and which ones have roots that we actually need? Wendy, what do you think?
hmm Yeah, that's a great question too, by the way. Um, and in my experience, the way I, decide those things, I think, first of all, you have to be aware of them to begin with. First things first, you have to recognize when you have a thought or you feel something, some kind of way towards something or someone, know where that's coming from. First off, identify where is that coming from? Why am I feeling that? Why is that my reaction? Um, and then when you can stop, just take a moment and a break and just think for a second before you open mouth, um, then I think it becomes the energy or the gut feeling about it. Like, is it something that really fires I feel so passionate about it. I don't think I think the ones that we feel the most passionate about are the ones we should question the most, is what I think. Because I think if it's deeply entrenched in us, like from childhood, because our parents told us or our community, whatever, we learned those things along the way, this got deeper ties. And those are the ones I think we really need to pay attention to because they can be the ones that we need to keep us grounded, but they can also be the ones that are derailing us from what we actually could come to know or believe if we opened ourselves up to that instead of just blocking off any other thought processes besides that one. So I think it's about awareness and paying attention to what you're feeling and where that's coming from.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the healing thread here then from astrology viewpoint is Uranus moving into Gemini is about to shake up the way we talk to each other, how we work together and how we connect. And this can be the time, and we're already seeing this, that people finally say that thing that they haven't been willing to say out loud or do the thing that disrupts the status quo. How timely and relevant is that, Wendy?
Oh my gosh, right? Goodness sake. And I think it really are witnessing it happening in real time right now, because we've been so divided for so long. And we've been screaming and shouting at each other and over each other and at each other and all of, and nobody's listening. We've got all this information overwhelmed, but we're not letting it settle in and figuring out how to work that into our daily life and our daily reactions. I think people react before they think. But I also see recently more and more people saying, look, I I'm tired of this. I don't want to play this game anymore. I don't want to argue with you. I don't want to try to change your mind. I want to feel what I feel. You feel what you feel. And then let's just let each other do that and figure out how we can coexist without screaming at each other. And I do think it's happening more and more. There's more people feeling that just, oh my gosh, because gosh, I think the human nervous system, like we can only take so much of living in fight or flight mode. Like you live in that mode for so long, it will just drain us. And then, all the diseases that come from that and the illnesses that show up in the world from that. And I'm really seeing, though, a turn like in art, in conversations online, social media, um, people turning back to go, wait a minute, there's this AI thing going, and I don't know if it's AI or if it's real. So let's move toward things of comfort that we know and we know are real. There's no denying and keep ourselves grounded there. They're grounding themselves. They don't, I think most of them don't really realize they're not thinking that way, but that's exactly what they're doing. They're grounding themselves after all of this disrupt has been going on for so long with the chaos, in the world, not just here in the United States, in the world. But I think people are really starting to wake up to that and just go, yeah, I don't want to do this anymore. Let me off this ride. I didn't sign up for this.
Definitely. Well, Uranus right now is in the very last degree of Taurus, and that's 29 degrees, which is the degree of decay. So, yes, everything it just feels like it's all breaking and not in a good way. And, Uranus is going to move into Gemini. It's gonna still, um, make and break some things, but
Mhm.
hopefully then it relieves some of that stress and that chaos and turns things um, around. So those are all really good points. I'm going to go back to the structural part of this and look at that blueprint again from 84 years ago. That's just so to understand what's coming up for us. So this is the most recent history of this transit because it happens about every 84 years. So, but we're talking about World War II, which was from September of 1939. So it actually started in the last decaying degree of Taurus, like we are in now before, and then it ran through 1945. Uranus moved into Gemini then in 1941 and it was there until 1948. So 1941 directly covers when the United States involvement in World War II began. And that it also Uranus moved into Gemini just months before the Pearl Harbor attack, which of course brought the United States into the war, which is another, crazy correlation between
Mhm.
what happened then. So because it was in Gemini, then what happened was it was focused on communication and technology and story wars. Radio became the thing, how people got their war news, how they heard from their leaders, and how an entire nation, specifically ours, I'm talking about, stayed connected. So mass communication, that was a whole new thing with Uranus in Gemini, and it was on a scale that nobody had ever seen before. And then the first electronic computers started showing up and the way intelligence was being gathered and shared was completely new. So we're talking about propaganda and mass broadcasting. I mean, we're seeing that today. It that redefined public perception. So ideology, what you thought, who you believed, was determined by what you were listening to, what you were on the radio, what movie clips you saw at the movie house. It was fascism and democracy. As they say, history repeats itself.
Oh
Wendy?
boy, does it ever. Does it ever, ever. And isn't that, I kind of get goosebumps listening to how that actually played out astrologically and then and real world stuff, I don't say real world, I hate that term, but it is, everything's real world. All the energy and all of that stuff is real. So, but yeah, it's kind of crazy if you do take the time to sort of correlate all of that and go, oh my gosh. I mean, you could literally just change some words in there and you'd be talking about today, modern society, and the communication thing would be AI and social media. And, it's just a different technology. That's all. We wrapped it in a different tech, but it's the same thing happening. And people still are getting their information from whatever sources they're choosing to lock into, although they have so many options, so many choices. Sadly, I don't think people look at all the choices, though. I don't think they look at enough choices. I think everybody gets that loyalty thing and they go, no, this is my channel and that's what I'm going to watch for all my news. I'm going to believe everything that they say. And that's just a very dangerous place to exist these days because you can't always trust what you're being fed. You got to look past one side or the other telling their side. They're always coming from an agenda, always. And their agenda is to get you to agree with them and think like they do so that you'll support whatever they're trying to accomplish. And so, we need to pay attention and make sure that we're always moving in the world and talking in the world and being existing in the world the way that we are wanting to exist and not the way somebody else is telling me that I should exist or would be better off if I did that. No, everybody's got to find their own grounded identity and stand in it strong. I think that is the power. And I think that is the turning point for society because we can step away from all the noise, finally step back from all of that and say, no, I'm going to take a breath here and I'm going to start listening to me. I'm going to start trusting more in what my mind and my heart and my gut and all of those things are saying to me instead of just believing everything that somebody else is saying to me. Because that's a very dangerous path, I think. But isn't it weird that the gosh, that just listening to you painting that picture. I mean, you're laying out an energy map basically. Like you're showing the map of how and potential reasons why this is all happening, how it's happening, and then we just take that and plop it down in real life everyday stuff and go, oh, wow, look how that correlates. So people can think some of this stuff is woo woo all they want, but that's literally all you have to do. You go back and you map that stuff just like you so beautifully did, and then put that into your everyday life and go, oh, wow, okay. There might be something happening and that I'm not fully aware of that's steering the ship. And maybe I need to pay more attention to, well, who's steering the ship?
Yes. Well, as my mentor and teacher, Tiffany Harelik, always says, astrology is so literal. And I guess that's why this woo-woo nerdy person that I am loves it so much because it really is.
Yeah.
You can go back and just, like you said, correlate things.
It's crazy how you correlated it all. And I love all of the woo-woo stuff, but I've never like gone really down the rabbit hole on astrology. I don't know why. I've always loved it since I was a kid, but um, I think that once you do, it's like, whoa, how can you say, or how can you deny that there's got to be some correlation there? How can, literally especially the way you paint it and the way you put it out there in clarity, clarify it for everyone. Just say this was what was happening then, and this is what was affecting us then. And now today it's all the same way, but we're using different technology and words.
right,
It's
in
so
different
clear when you
ways.
paint it out like that.
But again, we both have different paths to get where we're going. And it doesn't matter what your path is. Where you're heading is where you're meant to go and what you're meant to do. So it doesn't matter that I'm getting there a different way than you. This is my way.
Yeah,
So let's talk about another aspect of all of this change and this communication and what happened back then. So there was this mass communication. Um, in 1944, the GI Bill came along, and it was a good thing. Everyone thought it gave education and home loans and unemployment support for returning veterans, and it built up a massive skilled middle class. The baby boomers practically overnight, but there's always a shadow side to things. So what happened was Black veterans were largely shut out of this because of discriminatory lending practices. So we always have to be aware um, that, okay, this feels really right, but you have to look at all sides of it. Like you said, you can't just take it all from one source. You have to have that dual nature of Gemini, both sides, because that same bill was two completely different realities depending on who you were. And that is the duality of Gemini.
that is so huge too, because um, again, it's all about perspective. We know our perspectives are based on everything that we've lived in our lives. That's how we get our perspectives, right? But like these policies and laws and all these things that are affecting, supposed to affect an entire population of people, there can't be a one size fits all, And here in the United States, there are plenty of communities who have been sort of left behind or minimized and dehumanized and all of the above. And those communities are the ones who usually suffer because people in large are not taking into account their perspectives and their lived truths. And the only way that you can do that, you can't experience what they've experienced or are experiencing, but you can listen to them and try to understand why they are feeling the way they feel and why things affect them the way that they affect them, because it's very real. And some of it's generational trauma that they've just carried that baggage into current, times. But a lot of it is identity and perspective. And so, I'm moving through the world a certain way because of who I am, who raised me, what family I was born into. You know, we all are. But if you stop for 5 seconds and think about who would I be if I was born in Iran, to a different family in a different time and whatever, um, that would affect the way I move through the world. That would affect my beliefs, my opinions, that would affect everything about me. And then I would no longer be completely thinking somebody in the United States, that's making these laws and rules applies to me, because they don't, not even a little. And so that's the danger of, I think, of what's happening today. But I also think that the whole, when we were talking about the things falling apart, breaking things, I think that's been going on for a while now. I think we have been breaking things, literally, systems and processes and all of the above. I think they're all breaking down for a reason. And I think instead of being afraid of it breaking down, for me, I'm just like, I don't want to be the one breaking it down, but I'll sit back and watch them break it down themselves, because that's what's happening. And whatever's antiquated and no longer working for today's world, today's society, which in my opinion is way more connected. We can say what we want to say about social media and all of the echo chambers and all. I understand that. But at the same time, it also broadened our horizons massively, because now we have access, to people of all cultures and beliefs who are on social media anyway. If they're on social media, you can go and be friends with them. Like, I'm gonna be their friend now, and then you can have those conversations, or you can see things as they post them. Go, oh wow, so that's what it's like to be them. You know, instead of just aligning with somebody that just completely believes everything you believe. That's never going to exist either. We can't always. There's no two people who are ever going to see the world exactly the same because we all experience it differently and uniquely to us. But widening our horizons, broadening those horizons, it's been great in a lot of ways with social media and the internet and AI and all of that. There's so many positive things happening because of all of that. But then there's also negative things happening because of all of that. But that's kind of reality, isn't it? There's always that shadow side for anything. there's this big energy that comes into existence. There's always going to be a shadow side to that. And that is ultimately left up to each person to decide which side of history do you want to be on, and that's huge right now. Which side of history do we want to be on? We really need to think about that. With everything happening today, we really need to think about that.
Absolutely. And, when you're talking about this reminds me of a little video you posted, I don't know, yesterday or day before about two truths can be,
Mhm.
they can
Two things
coexist.
can,
Two
yeah,
things. Yes.
two things
That,
can be true at the same time.
absolutely. That's this Gemini duality. Two things can be true and they don't appear to be. They may
Uh-huh.
look totally different, but it doesn't mean that they both aren't true. And
Exactly.
yeah, we definitely need to put that in our heads and remember that.
Yeah, because then
I love
that's like
that.
huge on a daily basis, because people are just shutting other people down by, oh, I don't even know how you came up with that. Well, stop for a second and try to understand how they came up with that. And then maybe if
Right,
you do understand that, you'll be like, oh, gosh, there's a whole other perspective out in this world besides my own. Wow, epiphany.
right. And it reminds me, that astrology isn't just practiced in one form. There are many different types or forms of astrology. I practice Western evolutionary with Placidus, tropical Placidus houses. There are some with whole houses. There are some with fixed, um, with totally different ways of going about the astrology. But in the end, it doesn't really matter how you practice it. You get what you need from it. That's that different paths thing. So, we have to remember that we don't all need to get there the same way. We don't have to believe the same thing. We have to just allow for other people to have their ways and beliefs without hurting others.
Absolutely. And judging somebody else's way of getting there is just ridiculous. Like, why would you do you want people to judge the way you're getting there? And people
Right.
are demonizing AI, and yet there's a lot of great things that have happened because of AI, So early on, when AI came onto the scene, I started saying, okay, it actually didn't have anything to do with AI. It was a channel, or that's what it was. But I finally came to the conclusion after so many years that I need to pay attention to the message and not the messenger. If the message really grabs me and it resonates with me, I should listen to that. I should pay attention to that, no matter who the messenger is or where that message is coming from. If it resonates with me, I need to pay attention and explore that a little bit before I just dismiss it and say, oh, that's AI talking to me. I don't want it, like,
Right.
no, you just listen to the message.
Listen to the message. All right, so I'm going to go a little deeper now into
Yeah.
the history of the astrology. 500 years of Uranus and Gemini cycles, that 84, every 84 years. It tells us one thing consistently. This is a wake-up call. Every single cycle, whether it was Revolutionary War pamphlets or the Civil War telegraph or World War II radio, it all comes back to the same questions. who gets to speak, who gets to be heard, and whose version of the truth gets to win. Now, I don't really like that phrase gets to win because I believe that if it's good, it's a win for all of us. But that's how history keeps, going around. I'm looking at this. Uranus in Gemini is like a sacred rewiring of how we perceive the broader world together. And it's dismantling the old binaries or the duality of Gemini. And we've been living in that duality for some time now, that we've been handed it. So it's right and wrong, it's good and evil, and it's us and them. And it sounds so black and white, but in times like these, it almost is. You're right, those things are breaking. And what are we going to rebuild with? I believe that the good will win. I believe not so much in the us or them, right and wrong, good and evil. That's a black and white viewpoint, but it's kind of what we're looking at. So I'm looking at this time through that lens of astrology, which explains the timing and the themes. Wendy's been looking at it through the lens of how it was, how it's being lived, and how it's experienced. So, what is this asking of all of us? It's the same question, no matter how you're looking at it. Um, Uranus and Gemini energy is going to be here through um, 2033. I mean, it'll mostly till 2032, but then it goes into the next sign, but it comes back in. So it's 2033. So it's not a moment. This is a chapter in history. So,
I think that that's where we're at. I mean, isn't that being reflected to us right now? It feels so
absolutely.
much bigger than just a moment, so much bigger. Everything has more meaning. Everything is in my, the way I'm seeing it anyway. Everything is so much bigger than just this moment. And I think that's so important for people to remember, especially anybody who is a part of a minimalized community, which races, genders, what all of that stuff. We have women, I mean, there's been so many parts of our society have been kind of pushed aside and always got the short end of the stick. Um, but like I said, it's not about this moment in time. This is much bigger than that. And I think Artemis too, I don't know if it, that was so amazing. What a cool thing to be alive to witness, right? And then the messages from those astronauts
From
after
the
they were
sky.
back on Earth, well, from
Yes,
up there. And then once they were
yes.
back on Earth, I get goosebumps every time I think about it. I think we couldn't have chosen better four people to represent humanity than those four people because they spoke beautifully about what that was like to have that perspective that none of us will likely ever experience in our lifetimes. Well, I don't know, they're going to build a base, I don't know, on the moon, I guess, so maybe, but I mean, right now there's very few people in existence that would ever that have experienced something like that, to be that far out in space and look back on your own planet. Like, wow, that has to be just soul shifting to get that jolt of reality, I would think. And for me, I don't have to be on a spaceship. I don't need to go up in there just to feel that way. Now, I think if I ever had that opportunity, it would be overwhelming because I already am able to imagine it so much. Like imagine, you know, and sometimes when I'm meditating, I can focus on the feeling of being the bigger picture and not just this little person on this little planet in this moment of time. I'm connected to all of the bigger things, and when I can connect to that and really open that up, my gosh, what a feeling. And that is so much bigger than a moment in time. That's so much bigger. This is all about a chapter, and we are blazing new chapter, I think, every day, every minute of every day. And the next chapter is going to be decided by humans, by humanity, and what we decide which side of history do we want to come down on. And I think or I feel like the positive energy, which again, you said that can be through any vehicle you choose or path that you want to get there with. It doesn't matter. We're all thinking, and we're all going to come to the same place at the end of that path. Um, I believe. And I think those positive energies and the greater good is winning. Like I said, I don't really like that word, but I do. I think we're making headway. I think we're making progress faster than I've ever seen. Just like AI is changing the world faster than we've ever seen, I think positive energy is changing the world faster than we've ever seen also. And I think that's part of the reason why things are going up in smoke and breaking all over the place, because those things, while there can be two different things that can be true at the same time, those two things can't exist in harmony at the same time. When somebody, that those extreme ends of whatever you want to call it, good and evil, good or bad, whatever, I don't really like those titles either, but the extreme energy ends, those are always fighting each other. So it's the messy middle part that, in my opinion, that's expanding, and those end pieces that are just making all the noise are just fizzling out there. This one's expanding, and we are pushing that out further away from our common good and our common beliefs, I think.
Excellent way to express that. Coming together,
Mhm.
not going to the extreme ends again, but coming together. That is just the perfect way um, to end this. Thank you so much.
Thank
Wendy,
you.
why don't you tell people how they can hear more from you?
Yes. So I spent the last year building this whole huge foundation of things, and I have stuff built all over the internet. And most recently, I thought, oh my gosh, I put too much focus on building things and not enough focus on actually getting my message out there, and talking about what I want to talk about. And so my focus has shifted, and I'm honing in on what, just narrow it down and focus and get the message out in one or two platforms instead of trying to be all everything all up everywhere. So I am staying on Facebook. I'm doing a lot through my personal page. I have a Be Change You Seek page also. That's the movement. But sometimes lately, especially, I've been doing it on my personal page because it's not always what I want to have talking about on the Because page. Not for anything nefarious or but it just seems to fit in my real world thing, in my lived life experience. But so Facebook and YouTube, I try to put things on YouTube fairly regularly, or I'm starting to again. I think those are going to be my two chosen uh, platforms. So Wendy Fritz or Be Change You Seek. You can find me either way on Facebook and YouTube.
Excellent. All right, so I am on YouTube as Julie May Astrology, Facebook as Julie May Astrology, and you can also find me a few other places. But I'm in the same thing. I've been building so much, and now I'm trying to focus on where do I want to be. I will be starting a Substack because I enjoy the writing process, and Substack is about that. So,
That's awesome.
anyway,
I love that.
thank you. So I hope you got something from this today, and I believe our plan is to continue to do this.
Mm.
So far, it's been monthly. I think that's good, and we'll come up with a new topic for next month. I have one in mind. We'll see if Wendy agrees with me in the background. But it's along our same, I mean, it's still focused on what we are doing, which is a lot of it is healing generational stories
Mhm.
in our lives and for our family. So anyway, thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Love you.
Okay.